I thought we were past the hard part, married young, struggled together, built a life from scratch. We shared a tiny apartment with paper-thin walls and dreams that echoed louder than our arguments. I believed in us, even when he lost his job, even when I worked double shifts to keep us afloat, even when the spark faded into quiet comfort. I never expected betrayal, not after everything we'd survived. But when I stumbled upon a hidden phone with messages that made my skin crawl, I realized our marriage hadn't died, it had been murdered slowly. By lies, by secrecy, by her. This story isn't just about being cheated on. It's about waking up from a shared dream to find out you were the only one dreaming. Part 1. The Thin Walls of Trust. Our first home was nothing special. A one-bedroom walk-up with water stains on the ceiling and a heating system that rattled like it was possessed. But to me, it was a castle. We were 24, married for 2 years, and hopelessly in love. Or so I thought. Every creak in that apartment meant something. Footsteps that signaled his return from the grocery store. The buzz of his old phone charging on the counter. The soft hum of our voices tangled in late-night laughter. Looking back now, I wonder if the walls were always whispering warnings I refused to hear. We met in college, Alex and I. He was the type that made people feel calm around him. Like nothing could go wrong as long as he was there. Steady hands, soft eyes, and a smile that looked like home. We dated for 3 years before tying the knot in a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. Everyone called us the golden couple. The ones who beat the odds. First to marry. First to move in together. First to believe forever was more than just a pretty word. The first few years were tough, financially, emotionally. He worked in freelance tech. I was a nurse pulling long hours and sleeping short nights. There were fights about money, dishes, his job search, and whether we should try for a baby. But nothing ever felt unfixable. He always kissed me on the forehead before bed. He always said, "We'll figure it out." And I believed him. Until the night I found the phone. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I had just come off a double shift and my feet felt like they'd been crushed under cinder blocks. He was already asleep, or pretending to be, and his usual phone was on the nightstand, charging. I was looking for my earplugs in his drawer when I found it. A second phone. Smaller. Older. I almost didn't think twice. Maybe it was one of his test devices for freelance gigs. But the screen lit up. A message preview. "Miss you already. Can still taste you on my lips." My stomach turned to stone. At first, I couldn't move. I stood there in the dark, the buzzing silence of the room crushing down on me. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. No passcode. Just conversations. Pictures. A full gallery of stolen moments with a woman I'd never seen. And yet, I knew her name. Rena. It popped up often. Always at odd hours. Always filled with phrases that made my chest ache. I scrolled for what felt like hours, reading proof of a reality I didn't know I was living in. Their messages weren't just sexual. They were emotional, intimate. He told her things he never told me anymore, about his fears, his dreams, how I didn't understand him anymore. They joked about our apartment. They shared playlists. They had us everything I thought was sacred, but in secret. I didn't wake him that night. I wish I could say I threw the phone at him, screamed until the walls cracked, demanded answers. But I didn't. I quietly put the phone back and slipped into bed next to the man who was no longer my husband, even if he was still wearing the ring. Sleep didn't come. My brain felt like a blender on high speed, memories clashing with disbelief. Questions spinning into nausea. How long had this been going on? How did I miss the signs? Was he still in love with me? Or had he just become good at pretending? By morning, I was numb. I moved through the motions like a ghost in my own life, brushing my teeth next to him, sipping coffee while he scrolled through his other phone in the bathroom. My eyes searched his face for a flicker of guilt. There was none. Just the same soft smile he always gave me. The same hand on my lower back as he kissed me goodbye. And that's when I knew, he hadn't just betrayed me. He'd become someone else. And I didn't even notice. Part 2. Living with a stranger. The days that followed felt like a cruel game of pretend. I played the role of loving wife with the precision of a seasoned actress. I cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his half-hearted jokes, even laid beside him at night and let his arms wrap around me like nothing had changed. But everything had. My world had split down the middle the night I found that phone. The man I once trusted with my life had become a stranger who still kissed me good morning and made coffee just the way I liked it. The worst part wasn't the affair. It was the familiarity in his lies, how easily he slipped into routine, into comfort, as if the home we'd built wasn't a house of cards shaking in the breeze of his betrayal. Every time he left the apartment, I found myself retracing steps, checking where the phone was hidden, replaying conversations in my head, wondering if he had told her about me the way he had told me about her. It was a surreal kind of torture, living under the same roof, knowing he was choosing her in secret while pretending to choose me in daylight. One night, I followed him. He said he had a freelance consult at a co-working space downtown. I kissed his cheek, handed him his laptop bag, and waited 5 minutes before grabbing my coat and slipping out the door. My hands shook the entire subway ride. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. Maybe I wanted to be wrong. Maybe I wanted to catch him working, typing away, sipping overpriced coffee and thinking of how to surprise me for our anniversary. But I didn't find that. I found him standing outside a bakery, laughing, with her. She was younger than me, maybe by 5 or 6 years. Beautiful, of course, long dark hair, bright eyes that crinkled when she smiled. She leaned into him like she belonged there, like I didn't exist. And he looked free, lighter than I'd seen him in months. He wasn't weighed down by guilt. He wasn't anxious or fidgeting. He looked like a man in love with someone else. I didn't confront them. I watched from across the street, hidden behind the crowd. They walked hand in hand down the sidewalk like a couple in a rom-com, ducking into a boutique hotel just 10 minutes later. I stood there for what felt like hours, frozen in time, the sounds of the city muffled by the roaring in my ears. I finally made it home, knees weak, throat raw from holding in tears. I collapsed on our couch and screamed into the throw pillows, the sobs ripping through my chest so violently I thought I might actually break. And maybe I did. Maybe part of me stayed broken after that night. He came home late, said the meeting ran long, said he was starving. I watched him eat leftover lasagna like he hadn't just spent the night with another woman. His shirt smelled like her perfume, sweet and powdery. I wanted to vomit. I didn't ask him anything. What could I say that wouldn't shatter everything? The next morning, I called out sick from work. I needed time, not just to think, to plan. I couldn't live in limbo, pretending this life was still mine. I needed answers, not just from him, from myself. What was I still doing here? Why was I holding on? It took me another week before I cracked. We were watching a movie, curled up on the couch, his arm draped lazily around my shoulders. I couldn't even feel it anymore, the comfort, the warmth, the safety I used to find in his touch. My eyes were on the screen, but my mind was miles away. That's when I said it. Softly, so softly it almost got lost beneath the dialogue. Do you love her? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He said nothing. Just stared at the screen, his jaw tight, his body still. I stood up and walked to the bedroom without another word, and when the door clicked shut behind me, I knew something was over. Not just the marriage, something deeper. The illusion, the faith, the version of him I had built in my mind. I didn't cry that night. I didn't beg or plead or scream. I lay in bed and imagined my life without him. And for the first time, it didn't terrify me. Part 3, The Shadow of Truth. After that night, the night of silence, of the question left unanswered, things didn't fall apart all at once. They decayed slowly, the way fruit does when left too long on the counter, still holding its shape, but rotting inside. He began staying out later. No excuses this time. No lies about meetings or work calls. Just silence. Sometimes, he wouldn't come home until morning. And still, he wouldn't talk about it. I think he assumed I knew, and maybe that made it easier for him. Easier to ignore, to avoid the wreckage he'd created. But I wasn't idle. While he disappeared into someone else's bed, I started taking my life back in pieces. I found a therapist, someone objective, someone who didn't know either of us. In those first few sessions, I couldn't stop shaking. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the tea she offered. But slowly, I began to speak, and when the words came, they didn't stop. I poured everything out, the confusion, the self-blame, the shame I carried for not leaving sooner. She told me something I still hold on to. You don't owe him your suffering just because you once loved him. I repeated it to myself like a prayer. One morning, I took the day off and cleared out the spare room. It had become a graveyard of junk, old books, and used workout gear. Boxes we never unpacked after the move. I cleaned it out, repainted the walls, and filled it with light. It became mine. A room without him in it. A room for healing, for breathing. And then came the day I found the envelope. It was tucked inside his briefcase, half hidden under papers. My fingers moved before my mind caught up, and when I unfolded it, I felt everything in my body still. A lease agreement. Her name. A move-in date, just 3 weeks away. He was leaving. Not just emotionally, physically, entirely. And he hadn't said a word. That night, I set the envelope on the kitchen table. No note, no dramatic scene. I just placed it there and waited. He came home past midnight, smelling like bourbon and perfume. He saw the envelope, looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, spoke plainly. "I was going to tell you." I nodded. Not because I believed him, but because I didn't care anymore. "You don't have to," I replied, voice steady. "I already know." He opened his mouth, maybe to explain, maybe to apologize, but I didn't want either. "It's okay," I said, surprising even myself. "You can go." And for once, he didn't fight. He packed over the weekend, quietly, carefully, like a thief returning to the scene one last time. I didn't help. I didn't cry. I didn't ask what he was taking or where he'd be. He left Sunday afternoon. The door clicked shut. The echo filled the silence he'd left behind. I sat on the floor, knees to my chest, and let the quiet settle. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the first step. In the following days, I deleted every photo of us, archived the wedding album, changed the locks, reclaimed my space, inch by inch. I started cooking for one, sleeping across the entire bed, playing music I loved without worrying about whether he'd roll his eyes. People always ask when you knew it was really over. I think it was the moment I stopped hoping he'd come back and realized I didn't want him to. He didn't just cheat on me with another woman, he cheated on the life we built, on every plan, every late-night conversation about growing old together, every part of me that believed we were unbreakable. But I'm learning now, being broken doesn't mean you stay shattered. Sometimes, it means you get to rebuild. And this time, I'm building for me. Part 4, The Aftermath of Empty Spaces. In the beginning, it was the silence that hurt the most. Not just his absence, but the echoes he left behind. His toothbrush beside the sink, a half-empty cologne bottle in the bathroom cabinet, the dent on his pillow where his head used to rest. It's strange how the things they leave behind hurt more than the things they take. I kept thinking I would wake up and the whole thing would have been a nightmare. That he'd walk through the door like nothing had changed and wrap his arms around me, whispering that it was all a mistake. But he didn't. Instead, I got texts. Cold, practical. "Can I pick up the rest of my clothes Tuesday? Please leave the keys in the mailbox." No apologies, no explanations, just logistics. It felt transactional, like our entire marriage had been reduced to bullet points and time slots. I kept functioning. Somehow, I showed up to work. I answered emails. I smiled at friends who didn't know, who kept asking how you two were. I'd nod and say, "We're fine," because I didn't have the energy to explain the wreckage underneath. But inside, I was breaking. Not because I missed him, that faded faster than I expected, but because I missed who I was before I knew what he was capable of. I was someone who believed in forever, who thought love could survive anything, who thought loyalty meant something. That woman died when he walked out. One night, about 2 months after he left, I got a message on Instagram. It was from her. At first, I didn't believe it, but the name was unmistakable. The woman he left me for. The woman who used to just be a friend. The one I never suspected until it was too late. Her message was short and strange. "I'm sorry, I didn't know everything. I should have." That was it. No details, no apology for me, only a vague acknowledgement that she wasn't innocent either. I didn't respond, not because I didn't have things to say, trust me. I had plenty, but because I realized I didn't want to talk to someone who helped dismantle my life, no matter how sorry she claimed to be now. A few days later, a mutual friend reached out, hesitant, nervous. I think you should know, he's already moved on. Apparently, she wasn't enough either. He had someone new. Again. I expected it to hurt, but it didn't. It confirmed what I'd started to suspect. It was never about love. Not real love. It was about attention. About ego. About filling a hole in himself so deep, no one could ever satisfy it for long. And I was finally done blaming myself for not being enough. Then came the real work. Rebuilding, piece by jagged piece. I started therapy twice a week, journaled every day, sometimes just a single sentence, "You are healing." I unfollowed people who reminded me of the old life, took weekend trips alone, learned to enjoy silence again, this time on my terms. And one day, I looked in the mirror and saw someone else. Not the version of me he knew, soft, accommodating, naive. But a new woman, one who knew what it meant to survive betrayal and still choose to hope. One who knew her worth didn't depend on someone staying faithful, but on her choosing to be faithful to herself. I'm not saying the pain is gone. Some nights still sting. Some memories still sneak up when I least expect them. But here's the truth. I don't want him back. Not even a little. I don't want the version of myself that settled for half-truths and unanswered questions. I want this life, uncertain, yes, but honest, clean, whole. And that's more than I ever had with him. Part 5, the conversation I never needed. Months passed. The pain dulled, not vanished, but softened like the ache of an old bruise. Life didn't just move on, it grew in new directions. I took up pottery, something I'd once dreamed of but never made time for. I rearranged the apartment. Donated the bedding we used to share. Bought a new coffee maker, one that only made 1 cup at a time, just for me. Then, out of nowhere, he called. Not a text. Not an email. A call. The kind of thing people used to do when they wanted something to matter. I stared at the screen, heart thudding, for what felt like hours. And I answered. "Hey," he said, voice low. Hesitant. Almost familiar. "Hi," I replied, more steady than I expected. There was a pause. A long one. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot lately. I didn't speak. I let him sit in his silence. He finally went on. "I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't handle any of it right. I hurt you, and I know I can't fix that. But I needed to say it." There it was, the apology I thought I wanted. But now, hearing it, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not hope. Not even the hollow ache of nostalgia. Just a calm understanding that I no longer needed him or his remorse to feel whole. I could have unleashed the months of rage. I could have asked him why. Demanded explanations for all the unanswered nights, the lies, the betrayal. But instead, I said, "Thank you for saying that." Another pause. "I still think about you," he added. "I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't." "Don't," I interrupted, gently but firmly. "We both know what happened. And wondering won't change it." He sighed. "I guess I just hoped we could talk sometime." Really talk. I took a deep breath. My voice was soft but certain. I spent so long wishing for that. For closure. For truth. But I realized I gave myself both. I don't hate you. I just don't need anything more from you. He was silent again. "Take care of yourself," I added. "Goodbye." And I hung up. That night, I cried. Not because I missed him, but because I finally understood the weight I had been carrying. The silent hope that he'd one day say something to fix it all. And now that he had tried, I realized I didn't want it fixed. I wanted new. Not a patchwork version of what we had, but something real. Something mine. And here's the part no one tells you about healing. It's not a straight line. You'll still flinch when someone wears his cologne. You'll still feel an ache when you see couples laughing in grocery store aisles. But you'll also laugh again. You'll build a life again. And one day, you'll wake up and realize the pain is just a part of your past, not your present. I don't know where he is now. I don't care. But I know where I am. Here. Whole. Enough. Part 6, Strangers in Familiar Rooms. It had been almost a year since I walked out of that house, our house, and every time I passed that street, I looked away, not out of fear, not even pain, just indifference, at least, that's what I told myself. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. I was at the grocery store, minding my own quiet life, a cart half full of fresh fruit and chamomile tea, when I turned down the baking aisle and nearly collided with him. Him. And her. He had one hand on the cart, she had the other. Their fingers brushed as they reached for a bag of sugar. They laughed, a private laugh, the kind that bubbles up between people who share secrets and sheets. I froze. He noticed me first. His smile died on his lips the moment our eyes met. Hers followed his gaze, and her face stiffened. For a second, the world narrowed into just that aisle, linoleum beneath my feet, the overhead lights humming, the unmistakable thump of my own heartbeat. I nodded, just barely, a gesture so small it might have been mistaken for nothing. He cleared his throat. Hey. Like we were old coworkers, like he hadn't rewritten my entire life with his betrayal. She offered a half smile. Hi, you look well. I didn't respond to her. I couldn't. I looked straight at him and said, I hope you're both happy. Then I turned my cart around and walked away, leaving behind the cake mix I came for and the ghosts I didn't. But that encounter, short as it was, stayed with me, not because it hurt, though it did, but because of how little I felt afterward. I didn't go home and cry. I didn't spiral into what-ifs or call friends to rehash the pain. I went home. I poured a glass of wine. I sat on my balcony and watched the sun slip behind the buildings. And I realized something important. They were now strangers, just people in a store, holding a cart full of cheap sweetness and artificial joy. That's what their love had always been. Temporary, convenient, built in the shadows. And I was living in the light now. In the weeks that followed, I felt a strange sort of power growing in me, a power that comes from surviving the kind of pain that should have destroyed you, and realizing you're still standing. Not only standing, but building. I reconnected with friends I'd distanced myself from during the worst of it. I traveled alone, and it wasn't sad. It was exhilarating. I took photos for myself, not for social media. I danced in a city where no one knew my name. I kissed a stranger under foreign stars and felt alive in ways I hadn't since before him. And maybe that's the point of these heartbreaks, not to reduce us, but to reshape us. Some love stories end with a kiss. Mine ended with a mirror. And what I saw reflected back. Not someone broken, but someone reborn. Part 7, The Rebuilding. Healing isn't linear. People say that like it's some helpful warning, but they never tell you just how messy that line can be. How some mornings you wake up humming and energized, and others you lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell you ended up here. But slowly, that gray fog started to clear. Not because of time alone, time only dulls the blade. It doesn't remove it. It was the work, the relentless, uncomfortable, exhausting work of facing myself. I started therapy, real therapy, the kind where I peeled myself open week after week, shedding layers I didn't even know were weighing me down. Turns out, betrayal doesn't just leave emotional bruises, it makes you question your entire identity. Was I too naive? Too trusting? Too blind? No. I was simply someone who loved fully and didn't expect the person beside me to be slicing the foundation from beneath our feet. There's no shame in trusting the wrong person. The shame would have been in staying after I knew the truth. And I didn't. I sold the house. Yes, that house. The real estate agent asked if I wanted to keep the dining table, the one we picked out together after our honeymoon. I told her to burn it for all I cared. I bought a modest apartment, high ceilings, big windows, no ghosts. At first, it felt hollow. The silence rang too loud, but over time, I filled it with new sounds, morning playlists, clinking mugs, the quiet rustle of a page turning at 1 a.m. I painted the walls myself, threw out the neutral palettes we once agreed on and filled the place with color, bold, unapologetic hues that didn't ask for permission. One night, standing in the middle of my new living room, wine glass in hand, music playing softly, I realized something. I wasn't rebuilding the old life. I was building a new one, from scratch, for me. And then, he reached out. Of course he did. It always happens this way, doesn't it? A text, out of nowhere. Hey. I saw your post. You look really happy. Just wanted to say I'm glad you're doing well. Miss talking sometimes. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was tempted, I wasn't, but because it was proof. Proof that I had truly left. That I had crossed some invisible bridge and wasn't looking back. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry. But because I no longer needed anything from him, not his validation, his regrets, or his ghost of an apology. Some endings don't need closure. Some endings are the closure. Part 8, The Woman I Found. There's a kind of silence that feels sacred. It's not the silence that hung between us when he stopped loving me, or the silence I endured when the truth cracked our lives in two. No, this silence is different. It's peaceful. It's the quiet that comes from being alone and not being lonely. It's the sound of a healed heart finally beating without fear. A year has passed since I left. 1 year of uncomfortable growth, of crying in the shower, of rebuilding friendships, of discovering new passions. I traveled, alone, for the first time. I sat on a sunlit cafe terrace in Florence, scribbling in a journal while sipping espresso, and for the first time in ages, I didn't feel like half of something broken. I felt whole. I met new people. I laughed again. Really laughed. The kind that shakes your whole body and makes strangers turn their heads. I stopped flinching when I saw couples holding hands. I stopped measuring new men against the weight of my ex. And then one day, I met someone. Not in a fairy tale way. Not a whirlwind or a rescue. Just a conversation that turned into a coffee that turned into a walk that turned into something kind. He didn't try to impress me. He listened. He asked real questions. He never once made me feel like I had to shrink to fit inside his world. But here's the real twist, he wasn't the turning point. I was. For the longest time, I thought my healing would be marked by someone new, that I'd know I was okay when I found another relationship, another person to hold me through the night. But that's not how it works. Healing didn't come from falling in love again. It came from choosing myself over and over. From deciding to wake up and care about how I felt. From taking responsibility for my joy, my future, my peace. He betrayed me. That's his story to live with. Mine is the story of a woman who crawled from the wreckage, stood up barefoot and bleeding, and walked forward anyway. If you had told the broken version of me, the one crying in the bathroom at 2 a.m., wondering what she did wrong, that she'd one day feel powerful again, she wouldn't have believed you. But here I am. Stronger. Smarter. Softer in some places, harder in others. No longer searching for answers in someone else's mouth. No longer asking, why wasn't I enough? Because now I know. I was always enough. He just wasn't.